Okay, this is part 2 of the class that we hold here at the Bellflower office. And this class is from 1 to 3:30 on Saturday, one time a month. My name is Jean Browning. I'm broker associate with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, California Property, Bruce Mulhern broker. And I'm here to go over the second half, which covers the disclosures. Disclosures is so very important. If you have a transaction and your seller has not disclosed a material fact to the buyer, it will come back and bite you. So if your seller ever says, should I disclose this? Just the fact that he asked you, I think there's a strong probability that you should disclose, okay? So there is a statutory disclosure requirement that's right in the purchase agreement. Seller shall, within the time specified in 14A, which is 7 days, deliver to buyer, if required by law, a fully completed federal lead-based paint disclosure and pamphlet, and unless exempt, a fully completed disclosure or notice required in Section 1102 Civil Code. Statutory disclosures include, but are not limited to, real estate transfer disclosure statement, natural hazard disclosure statement, notice or actual knowledge of release of illegal controlled substance, notice of special tax and or assessments. And a lot of this is covered in the natural hazard disclosure report, which you can order as soon as you get the listing. We do work with Property ID, and they will be glad to send you a natural hazard disclosure report. Sometimes it's come in handy for me because I'll have it with me at a open house of one of my listings, and a potential buyer will come in and they'll want to know if we're in a flood area or if we're in especially in areas where they have the canals, or if it, like for instance up in Yorba Linda where they had all those fires. Sometimes they want to know if they're in a fire area, and that natural hazard disclosure came in handy. So it's kind of nice to have. So I highly recommend you try to get it in HD as soon as you can, because it also tells you things like special tax assessments like Mello-Roos. If your seller fails to tell you about that and the transaction closes, your seller is going to be responsible for that Mello-Roos down the road. So, and people will try to come after the agent as well, but technically the seller is responsible to disclose any Mello-Roos. So notice of an actual knowledge of industrial use and a military ordinance, which is pretty much all in NHD. Any statutory disclosure required by this paragraph is considered fully completed if seller has answered all questions and completed and signed the seller section, and the listing agent, if any, has completed and signed the listing broker section in the TDS. And we will go over that in just a minute, but it is really important that disclosure comes out on the TDS. So let's go over the transfer disclosure statement. So when you're presenting, it says in coordinated with other disclosures. So if there are additional reports, you can, up on the 2 boxes, you can mark any additional inspection reports or disclosures on hand. And then if you get down to the seller's information, there's a little question there. It says, is the seller is or is not occupying the property? That's one of the boxes it seems like a lot of the sellers miss, but it's very important, because when you do give these disclosures, the fact that you haven't occupied the property may determine the gray area if he says that something is working or not. So the seller discloses the following information with the knowledge that even though this is not a warranty, prospective buyers may rely on this information and decide whether and on what terms to purchase the subject property. Seller hereby authorizes and any agents representing any principals in this transaction to provide copy of this statement to any person or entity in connection with any actual or anticipated sale of the property. And you notice it says California Civil Code at the top. This is the item, if you were to go to arbitration, this is the item that the seller or buyer would probably take with them, because there's something that was not disclosed on this TDS, and he feels that he should get some sort of liquidated damages for the problem. So when the seller fills this form out, My advice is to let the seller do his own pace. Let the seller just go down the list himself and mark it off. There's different ranges of people reading, and you be going range oven, microwave, dishwasher, check, 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 check. But maybe that seller is more like a range, oven, microwave. If you try to hurry him, you just need to give him his time to take care of the filling out and just let him read it. And then it says at the bottom, are there, to the best of your seller's knowledge, any of the above that are not in operating condition? So if that dishwasher, if that garbage disposal isn't working, he needs to mark it now. You don't want to wait till the buyers get in and discover that it's not working. Even though the buyers will be doing a home inspection, if there's something that the seller is aware of, he needs to mark it on the TDS. So it's very important. Otherwise, you might have the seller, someone's going to have to come up with a dishwasher or a garbage disposal because it wasn't disclosed that it wasn't working. I should mention, there is a home warranty for the seller. It's inexpensive, I think like $1 a day that the seller can use for appliances that are maybe go out during the listing period. That is something that you can let your seller know about. Are you, the seller, aware of any significant defects in any of the following? Yes or no? And if he is aware of anything in the interior walls, the ceilings, the floors, he needs to disclose that to the seller, okay? So, to the buyer. And when he reads these questions down below where it says, are you, the seller, aware of the following? So there's 16 questions that the seller needs to read. A lot of times the seller just go, no, 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 no. When actually, if they're in a HOA, for instance, there's CC&Rs. That would definitely be a yes. And it says if the answer to any of these is yes, explain. So he would just say association, maybe the name of the association. But if there are any materials or products which may be an environmental hazard, if there's any features that are shared or common with adjoining landowners, such as walls, fences, driveways. Sometimes there is a driveway, one driveway, and both people use it and it goes to the back. He needs to disclose that. Any encroachments, room additions, repairs made without necessary permits, he needs to let them know. Any structural modifications that are not in compliant with building codes. So, or is there any fill in the property, any settling, or any flooding or drainage or grading problems? Or is there any major damage to the property from fire, earthquake, or landslides? If it's something that has been taken care of, maybe they did have a fire and everything's been taken care of. This is saying if there is any right now. So any lawsuits against the seller threatening to affect this property, claims or damages of the seller. If it's an HOA and there is a lis pendens against the HOA, you may have a problem being able to sell that property because it is attached to the property, and you may have to get a cash buyer possibly on that transaction unless the lis pendens is clear. So if there's any breach of warranty or Section 900 threatening to or affecting the real property, or claims of breach of an enhanced protection agreement. So just let him read and just let him say yes or no. The seller certified that the property, as of the close of escrow, will be compliant with Section 13113 of the Health and Safety Code, having smoke detectors, which are approved and installed in accordance with the state fire marshal, and the seller certifies at close of escrow of the 19211 of the Health and Safety Code to have water heaters. So there's going to be three things actually that the seller's going to need. He's going to need the smoke detectors, one in each side of each bedroom, one on the hallway, a smoke detector and carbon monoxide in the hallway, and if there is an opening to the garage, a carbon monoxide near there. But carbon monoxide is not a point of sale. It isn't mandatory as far as real estate side, but it is for the lenders. They'll want to see carbon monoxide. So make sure that the seller does have those items there when the appraiser comes. Because if it is not there, then the appraiser will have to come back. The appraiser has to take pictures of the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors and the water heater braced properly on 2 sides. And if that isn't done, then the appraiser will have to come back and sign off on it later. So it does cost the buyer some money. On the second page, seller certifies that the information herein is true and correct to the best of the seller's knowledge as of the date signed by the seller. So basically, this signature on top of this page is in regards to all the things that he commented about on the first page. So be sure to have the seller sign at the top. Then the next 2 sections, one is for the listing agent, one is for the selling agent. You are, even if the seller is exempt from filling out the TDS, and there are certain exemptions that I can tell you in a second, but even if the seller is exempt, you as a realtor are still obligated to do a full, diligent visual inspection of the property. So let's say the TDS is exempt from the seller. If that's the case, then in lieu of filling out this portion, you could fill out an agent visual inspection. Each selling agent and listing agent could fill out a separate agent visual inspection to cover this requirement. But bottom line, no matter what, the agents are still responsible even if the seller is exempt. Okay? So let's go over the agent visual inspection. The part I want to talk about on what I like about the agent visual inspection is the fact that the first page basically sets the scene for exactly what length and to what degree an agent visual inspection is being done. So an agent will not climb into a roof or into an attic. An agent will not move or look under or behind the furniture, pictures, or wall hangings or floor coverings. An agent will not inspect beneath the house or the structures under the property, or climb up a hillside, or move or look behind plants, bushes, shrubbery, and other vegetation. An agent will not operate appliances or systems, or such as, but not limited to, electrical, plumbing, pool or spa equipment, or heating, or cooling, or septic, or sprinkler. An agent will not touch any of those things. This is a visual inspection. Agent will not measure square footage of the lot or improvements, or identify, locate boundary lines. An agent will not determine if the property has mold, asbestos, lead, or lead-based paint. By statute, agent is not obligated to pull permits or inspect public records. Agent will not guarantee views or zoning, identify proposed construction or development. For any items disclosed as a result of the agent's visual inspection, agent will not provide an analysis or determine the cause of the source. So we'll go to the second page, and I'll just give you an idea of all the things that will be covered in that first page. So you go into the entry, and you walk up the cement area, and you'll see cracks and maybe some paint that drippings from where they had painted. You just put cracks and stains on cement entry porch. You don't know if it's paint, you could just say stains, just crack and stains. It's not a big crack, it's not a small crack, it's just a crack. No diagnosis of what it is. You go into the living room. If the living room has furniture, you want to cover yourself. Let's say that this cabinet right here, there's a hole under that carpet and that I'm not aware of, and I'm just doing a visual inspection. I'm not going to move that cabinet. I'm just going to write on my agent visual inspection, unable to view entire flooring and walls due to furniture and wall coverings. If there's a hole in that wall and that buyer comes in and they remove that picture and there's a hole there, I'm covered. So basically, you want to make sure that, you'll see that in regular inspections, an inspector will, if he isn't able to get to something, he will definitely note it, because he needs to state the reason why he did not detect it when he did his inspection. So if you go into the kitchen, usually there's cracks on the tile, if it is a tile counter, there's usually almost always a crack or a chip on the tile, and if it's a tile floor, the same there. There might be stains in the kitchen sink. It isn't mold, it's just stains. And if you see, usually I look behind the kitchen sink, there's usually a sliding window there for air to come in. If there's any windows that are missing screens, you should just note that, missing screen and sliding window. Or maybe the screen is damaged screen. Things that, this isn't you know, beautiful blue paint or nice red carpet. This is things that are, should be, that aren't. So if you go into the hallway, maybe there's no carbon monoxide in the hallway, or maybe there's a switch plate missing its cover. You go into the bedroom, there's stain on the carpet and stain on the wall. And you might see a stain in the ceiling, but you don't mark that it's a roof leak stain. No, you just say discoloration or stain in the ceiling. You just visually see what you see, and you aren't testifying what it's caused from. Then if you go into the bathroom, same thing. Usually it's the tub stoppers missing, stains in the bathroom, maybe some grout that's missing around the tiles, something like that. So you just want to note visually what you see. And then maybe in the laundry room, there's supposed to be a vent for the gas heater to go out. Maybe there's no vent there. You need to note that, missing vent for gas. And you go outside and you see a block wall fence. There's almost always a crack in the block wall fence someplace. And if you see shrubbery that's covering over, but the rest of the fence looks fine, put on there, unable to view entire fence due to foliage along the fence. And usually on the eaves, you want to check to see if there's the paint is peeling and chipping. If you're doing FHA, FHA will not allow exposed paint. I even had a seller have to paint his fence because the paint was chipping away at the fence, and the FHA required the fence to be painted. So you want to look at the roof and see if there's any missing tiles. Basically, there's always cracks on the cement driveway and cement garage floor. And I got to tell you, there was a time when I walked in, the cement was smooth as glass. And I put on my Avid, cement in good condition in the garage. When those buyers moved in and they pulled up some mats that were in the middle, which I thought was to protect the cement from the oil, it turned out it to be pit marks. Pit marks all through there. Guess who had to put, this was my first visual inspection. So that's why I make it very clear to cover my bases in the event there's any kind of obstruction of view. Okay, next is lead-based paint. This is exempt from houses built after 1978, but so sometimes I still have them sell it, I sign it just for the heck of it, but it is exempt if it is a house built after 1978. Hold harmless, there's a buyer's mold disclosure that Berkshire Hathaway has. Basically, it's just a mold hold harmless that we've had in our office, and it's one of the items that Berkshire Hathaway does require in their files. Residential earthquake hazards report. This is for houses that were built before 1960. There's a booklet, and I wish I brought it with me. There's a booklet, a homeowner's earthquake guide that tells you, gives you pictures of the structures of the house and the footings and how they're braced, and if the seller would or would not know, they would mark here. A lot of times they just don't know. They don't know if the house has crippled walls, for instance. But this booklet does describe it. If they take time out to read it, they would be able to answer better. But otherwise, they might just have to say, I don't know, or doesn't apply. But for instance, the water heater brace, that should always be yes. So don't just go down the row and just have the seller, oh, just mark everything, don't know, okay? You want the seller to read each and every question and answer on his own pace. The next one is just a little page that is included in that earthquake environmental booklet that I was telling you about. And you want the buyers and the sellers to sign, and the agents to sign that it was given to them, okay? The next one is the natural hazard disclosure statement. This is a statutory item, even if you're doing a manufactured home, or if you're even doing land sale, you'll need a natural hazard disclosure report. It is a statutory item, and This is another one that they could use in court, that they were not disclosed, that this property was in a liquefaction area or something, and that's a major disclosure. So you definitely want to get this one signed by everyone. Okay, signature of buyer, seller, and both agents. Next one is seller property questionnaire. They also have the statutory and contractually required related statements on here. In the last 3 years, has there been a death on the property? And they are not required if it's beyond 3 years. I highly recommend, though, that they do mention if they are aware, only for the sake of making it the best possible choice for the buyer. Whether the property is affected by a nuisance, is located in 1 mile of formal federal, which if there's any insurance claims in the last 5 years, maybe you had a fire or a flooding, you need to let the buyers be made aware of that. So I'm running out of time, but there's structural systems and appliances, disaster relief insurance, water-related, mold issues, pet and animals. I have some pets, trust me, I would have to mark yes on this one. You have to love those animals. Next, landscape, pool, and spa. Condominiums, condo interest development, subdivision questions, title ownership, neighborhood nuisances, noise. If there's any problems, I know I had one client said that her next door neighbor goes out on the porch and smokes, and the smoke comes into their room. I said, well, if it's noticeable, say yes and note it. It's better to disclose and let them know up front than let them move in and find out later and come back and get you. Any governmental things that they're aware of. Next one is carbon monoxide. Like I said, it's not a point of sale, but the lenders will require it. Be sure to have them there. The next one is the water heater and smoke detector. You should have where I mentioned the smoke detectors, and have the water heater braced in 2 places correctly. The next one is seller affidavit of non-foreign status. There's 2 sections. One is federal law, one is California law. Federal law is saying that if this person is a foreign national, they're going to have to pay 10 to 15% of the feds of the purchase price, okay? So you want to know for sure if that person is a foreign national. If they have a social security, or if they have some kind of form of citizenship that they can give escrow, because no one wants to put their social on this form, it's just a place for it, but they need to give it to escrow, and escrow will indemnify the seller. And then the second section is regards to occupancy, or if the transfer is a corporation or an LLC, and if it's an individual living at the property, or an individual selling the property, if they've lived in 2 of the last 5 years. And if they have not lived in the property in 2 of the last 5 years, they will have to pay 3 1/3% withholding out of their purchase, 3 1/3% of the purchase price when it be held. It's just a withholding, and have them check with their tax person to see if they're going to get that money back. I did it. I did get all my money back, but I cannot advise a seller on that. So in lieu of putting their tax return, here's the qualified substitute, and the escrow company will sign that they did in fact see proof that this person is a resident alien or a resident of here. And the buyer's inspection waiver, I always use that in the event that the buyer doesn't do their own home inspection, or the buyer decides that they don't want to pay termite, the seller doesn't want to pay termite. And even if there's a termite report out there, I need the seller to initial that they waive that termite. That protects your buyer. Notice of supplemental tax property bill. This is one of the items that you do need to put in your file to disclose to the buyer that if they buy the house, let's say they buy the house in June, and the current seller is paying $200 a month, and when it closes, it will be on that tax rate, $200 a month, until the property is reassessed. So let's say 6 months down the road, they close in June, at the end of the year, the property tax bill gets reassessed based on the current sales price. Whatever that difference is that he would have paid, because he's only been paying based on the current tax rate right now, they're going to send them a one-time supplemental bill to pick up that difference. So, as I said in the previous section, it's really important if you come to these classes. This is a 3.5-hour class that was put down into 30 minutes. So I really highly recommend that you do come to our listing contracts class, our purchase contracts class, and for that matter, all the wonderful classes that Berkshire Hathaway offers here at the Bellflower office. I have, I think, a minute left. I just got to tell you, there's a few things that you could offer to your seller. We have a cosmetic loan program where you can fix up the property for the seller, and then after the property closes, that's when the money that Berkshire Hathaway gives to that seller, that's when they get it back at close. But it's a wonderful program for a lot of people that just don't have the money to fix up their house to sell. So sometimes if they're, especially if they're using the 60 and 90 program and they need their house fixed up because to get the highest mark, so that way when the next house they buy, they can transfer that tax base to the next house, and that's another class. But bottom line, the cosmetic loan program is a great program for people in need of repair but just don't have the money. So thank you so much for listening to this little briefing today, and I wish you the best in your real estate business.